There's something different about people who never get jealous. Maybe it's the way they can genuinely celebrate someone else's success without that bitter aftertaste in their mouth. Maybe it's how they watch their partner talk to an attractive stranger and feel curiosity instead of threat. Or maybe it's that peculiar sense of security that doesn't come from controlling their environment, but from something deeper, something most people spend their entire lives trying to build and never quite achieve. Because the absence of jealousy isn't about being naive or checked out or emotionally repressed. It's a specific type of psychological architecture that researchers are only now beginning to decode. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to see why people without jealousy aren't just lucky or naturally confident. They're operating from a completely different psychological foundation that was built, consciously or not, through very specific experiences most people never had. Let's start with something that happened long before they even knew what jealousy was. Picture yourself at maybe 4 or 5 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor, playing with blocks while your parents move around each other, making dinner. Your father mentions he ran into his old girlfriend at the grocery store. She's back in town. They chatted for a few minutes. You're too young to understand the significance, but you notice everything. Your mother's face doesn't change. She asks a few friendly questions. How's she doing? Did she ever finish that degree? Your father answers casually while chopping vegetables. The conversation flows naturally to other things. Later, your mother goes out with her friends. Your father says, "Have fun," kisses her goodbye, doesn't ask where she's going or when she'll be back. Just trusts. When she comes home laughing, telling stories, he wants to hear them. He's genuinely interested, not interrogating. You absorb this, not consciously. You didn't think, this is what secure attachment looks like. You just watched two people move through their days, trusting each other completely. What psychologists call secure attachment style was being downloaded into your nervous system through observation. You learned that love doesn't require surveillance. These are adults who, when their partner mentions an ex or talks enthusiastically about a coworker, don't feel that automatic defensive response because jealousy requires seeing others as threats, and they never learned that lens. Now imagine you're 7 years old, and it's your birthday party at the neighborhood park. There's cake, games, presents piling up on the picnic table. Your best friend shows up with a gift that's clearly bigger and more expensive than anything on that table. Another kid whispers that it's probably a bike. The party continues, and here's what doesn't happen. You don't spend the rest of the afternoon obsessing over that wrapped box. You don't compare what you might get to what your friend gave you. You don't feel that gnawing sense that if their gift is better, yours must be worse. Because here's what you learned early. Maybe from parents who said things like, "We have everything we need." Or maybe from just living in a home where enough was enough. Other people having good things doesn't reduce your good things. Someone else's gift being expensive doesn't make yours cheap. Someone else's joy doesn't consume yours. When your friend opened their big gift later that week, yes, it was a bike, you felt genuinely excited for them. Not performed excitement. Real excitement. Because their winning didn't feel like you're losing. What researchers in positive psychology call an abundance mindset. The belief that there's enough success, love, attention, and resources to go around typically forms in childhood through repeated experiences of having enough. Not necessarily having everything, but having enough. These adults can watch a colleague get promoted and feel genuine happiness. They can see their sibling in a great relationship while they're single and not feel diminished. They don't need to be the smartest person in the room to feel smart. The best looking to feel attractive. The most successful to feel worthy. Because their sense of having enough was established long before they understood what comparison even was. But abundance mindset only holds if you have something else. Something even more fundamental. Picture yourself at 10 years old, bringing home a report card with mostly B's and 1 A, Your parents look it over. Your mother says, "These are solid grades. Are you happy with them?" And here's the critical moment. She's asking if you're happy, not telling you whether she is. She's locating the evaluation inside you, not outside. You think about it honestly. The B in math bothers you because you know you could have studied more. The A in English feels good because you worked hard on that essay. You say this. Your father nods, asks what you might do differently next semester for math. Nobody says you should be disappointed or you should be thrilled. They're teaching you to check your own compass. Your friend down the street gets straight A's and receives a new bike. You feel neither inferior nor cheated because your worth isn't being measured against hers. It's being measured against your own effort and potential. This happened over and over. At soccer games where you didn't score but played hard. At piano recitals where you weren't the best but improved. Someone was always teaching you to ask yourself, did I do my best? Am I proud of this? What developmental psychologists call internal locus of evaluation, the tendency to judge yourself by your own standards rather than external approval, typically forms when caregivers consistently redirect children towards self-assessment rather than comparison. These adults don't need to be better than others to feel good. They can admire someone else's talent, beauty, success, or relationship without feeling diminished because their self-worth isn't a competitive ranking. When their partner talks about how impressive a coworker is, they don't hear you're less impressive. They hear information about a coworker. Their internal compass is so well developed that external comparisons barely register as relevant data. But internal validation only works if you've learned another crucial skill that most people never develop. Take yourself back to age 8, the day your cat didn't come home. That orange tabby always came back by dinner time. Tonight, the food bowl sits full. You're scared. You want to go search every yard in the neighborhood, knock on every door, call every shelter. But your mother says something that will shape how you relate to everything you love for the rest of your life. We've done what we can do. Now, we have to trust she'll find her way back. You want to argue. But what if honey, worrying more doesn't bring her home faster. Controlling every possible outcome isn't possible. We have to trust. This felt impossibly hard. You lie in bed imagining scenarios. Then morning comes. The cat is on the porch, muddy, but fine. And your mother says, "See? She figured it out. She always does." This happened with other things, too. A friend going through something difficult. Your brother making a choice you worried about. And always the same lesson. You can care without controlling. You can love without managing every outcome. What researchers call differentiation, the ability to remain emotionally connected to someone while letting them be autonomous, is one of the strongest predictors of relationship satisfaction. These are people who can let their partner travel alone, have opposite-sex friends, live their own lives, without the constant anxiety that something will go wrong if they're not monitoring. Not because they don't care, but because they learned early that caring doesn't mean controlling. When their partner doesn't text back immediately, they don't spiral into, what are they doing, and with whom? They think, they're busy. When someone they love makes a choice they wouldn't make, they can accept it without feeling personally threatened. This trust made space for something else to develop. You're 13, sitting in the school auditorium as they announce the leads in the spring musical. You auditioned. So did your best friend. You both wanted the lead role desperately, practiced for weeks, dreamed about it at night. The drama teacher reads the name. It's your friend's, not yours. Your chest tightens for maybe 3 seconds. Then something happens that didn't happen for most kids in that auditorium. You turn to your friend, and you're genuinely, viscerally happy for them. You hug them hard. You scream with excitement. And it's real. Later, alone in your room, you feel disappointed. That's real too. But those feelings exist separately. Your disappointment about not getting the role and your joy at your friend's success occupy different spaces. One doesn't cancel the other out. Your mother asks how you're feeling. You say, sad for me, happy for them. She nods like this makes perfect sense. Because in your house, it does. You were never taught that someone else's winning means you lost. You were taught that multiple truths can exist at once. What researchers in positive psychology call compersion, feeling joy at another person's joy, is relatively rare. But compersion isn't natural for most people. What makes some people capable of transcending this default wiring? Early experiences that rewarded celebration over competition. Family systems where success wasn't a zero-sum game. These adults can be genuinely thrilled when their friend gets engaged while they're still single. Happy when a colleague gets promoted over them. Excited when their sibling buys a house while they're renting. When their partner talks enthusiastically about someone attractive, they can join in the appreciation instead of feeling threatened. They learned that joy multiplies when shared, and that being happy for others doesn't diminish your own capacity for happiness. But this celebration capacity rests on something even deeper. Imagine you're 11, standing in the gym while two team captains pick players for dodgeball. Names get called. One by one, kids walk over to their team. The group of unchosen shrinks. You're still standing there. Finally, near the end, your name is called. Not last, but close. Most kids in that situation learn they're only valuable when chosen first. They internalize that being picked last means being worth less. But you went home and your father was working on his car in the garage. You told him what happened. He said something strange. Did you have fun playing? Yeah, once the game started. Then who cares what order they picked you in? You know you're good at dodgeball. I know you're good at dodgeball. Some kid who barely knows you picking teams doesn't change reality. This response seemed almost alien, but it planted something crucial. Other people's choices about you don't define your value. They reveal their preferences, their biases, their context, but not your worth. This happened in other ways too. Not getting invited to a party. Not being someone's first choice for a project. And always, the message. Their choice is information about them, not a verdict on you. What psychologist Kristen Neff calls self-compassion, the ability to maintain stable self-worth regardless of external validation, protects against jealousy more than almost any other trait. Research shows that people whose self-worth is contingent, dependent on being better than others, or being chosen, experience more anxiety, depression, and jealousy. These people can watch their partner interact with someone more conventionally attractive and not feel their worth diminishing. They can see a colleague get praised and not take it as criticism of themselves. When someone doesn't choose them, romantically, professionally, socially, they don't spiral into what's wrong with me. They think, wasn't a match, or their preference is different. Because they learned early that being valuable doesn't mean being everyone's first choice. It means having inherent worth that exists independently of anyone else's selection process. This independence from external validation created space for perhaps the most distinctive trait. You're 15, in the kitchen after school, upset because the person you like is talking to someone else. Your mother is making coffee. You're explaining how this person you've liked for months is suddenly spending all their time with someone new. Your mother listens, then says something that sounds almost harsh. You don't own them. I know that. But no, really hear me. They're not yours to lose. They're a whole person making their own choices. If they want to spend time with someone else, that's their right. That doesn't mean you're losing something you had. You never had them. This felt cruel in the moment. But she kept going. You know what's actually happening. You're learning that you can really like someone and they can really like someone else, and both things can be true. That doesn't mean you weren't special. It means they're capable of multiple connections, just like you are. Years later, you were the friend someone else liked, and you liked someone else, and suddenly you understood. People aren't territories to be defended. They're autonomous beings making choices. Sometimes those choices include you. Sometimes they don't. Neither says anything definitive about your worth. What researcher Bella DePaulo calls singular thinking, the belief that romantic partners should be each other's only source of emotional fulfillment, creates the breeding ground for jealousy. But most people never learn this. They're raised on media showing possessive love as romantic. Songs about you're mine and movies about fighting for someone as if they're an object to be won. These adults don't view their partner's friendships, interests, or past relationships as competition. They don't need to be the only person their partner finds interesting, attractive, or worth spending time with. When their partner laughs at someone else's joke, they don't feel threatened. They learned what most people never do. Love isn't possession. It's freely given attention that can be withdrawn anytime. This reframing made one final shift possible. Think about the first time you were truly alone. Maybe college. Maybe a solo trip. Maybe just a weekend when everyone else was busy. You're by yourself for days. No texts coming in. No plans. No validation that you exist in anyone else's mind. And here's what didn't happen. You didn't panic. You didn't spiral into, does anyone care about me? You didn't feel that existential terror that maybe if people aren't thinking about you, you don't matter. You felt fine. Maybe you felt peaceful. You read, cooked, walked, thought. Your existence didn't require witness or validation. You were real to yourself, which was enough. Later, someone you cared about didn't text back for a day. Most people would spiral. Where are they? Who are they with? Why aren't they thinking about me? But you were fine, because your security wasn't located in their attention. It was located in something you'd built internally over years of small moments. What psychologists call differentiated self-worth, security that comes from within rather than from external validation, is the final piece. These are people who don't need constant reassurance from partners, who can go days without contact and not catastrophize, who don't need to be the center of someone's universe to feel secure in the relationship. When their partner goes out without them, they don't need a detailed itinerary and check-ins. When someone doesn't respond immediately, they don't spiral into insecurity. They genuinely feel okay because their stability comes from within. Now let's be honest. Not all of this was healthy for everyone. Some people who don't feel jealousy are actually just avoidantly attached or emotionally disconnected. Some people learn to not care as a protective mechanism against being hurt. That's different. That's not confidence. That's defensiveness disguised as security. The people we're describing aren't emotionally numb. They feel everything. They just don't feel threatened. So that's the psychology of people who never get jealous. They learned early that love doesn't require surveillance, that other people's success doesn't diminish their worth, that they're valuable whether or not they're chosen first or chosen at all, that people aren't possessions to be defended, that their security comes from inside, not from constant external validation. In a world that runs on comparison, that monetizes insecurity, that teaches you to view every other person as potential competition, these people carry something increasingly rare. They can be happy for others genuinely. They can love without controlling. They can feel secure without constant reassurance, because jealousy is exhausting. And some people just never learn to carry that weight.